Hello guys, so I'm here today to tell you about methods. So this is going to be a huge new topic in computer science. We're going to use methods in every program we make for the rest of the year. And basically, here's the deal with methods. When you write your code, you might have some feature that you might want to use multiple times. So for example, last week we had a factorial program. Now, if you wanted to calculate factorials of, say, tens or hundreds even of different numbers in your program, instead of having to copy paste that code 100 different times, wouldn't it be nice if we could just write that code one time and then access it whenever we want it? And that's the idea of methods. So you can write other methods in your program besides the main one. So when you run your program like this, when you just hit run, it just runs whatever's inside your main, right? And any code that's in here happens. So you can write as many other methods as you want, still inside the outer set of squigglies, but outside of the public static void main. So you can write other methods beyond main, but still inside the class. So a class is actually mostly just a collection of methods, well, so far. So we can have, like, let's say I want a method called public static void my name. And this is going to be like a pretty lame method, and all it's going to do is print out my name. System.out.println. It'll just say my name is Gary, and then I am lame. Funny story about that, I'll probably tell you in class. Okay. Oops. So, when I run my program, though, it's not going to automatically run this. When I hit run, it just runs whatever's in main. So the run button looks for your method named main. Okay. So when you hit run, it says, okay, I'm going to find a method named main. All your other methods are going to be like, public static void, and then they have a different name. So this is just another method called my name. And it has parentheses at the end. The parentheses tells you that it's a method. If you don't put parentheses, it thinks it's a variable. Okay, so now you might be wondering, how do I access this bit of code? So if you want to call a method, so to call another method that is written inside of this program, I just write the name of the method. So if I want to call this my name method, I just have to literally type, oops, wrong spot. I just need to literally type my name and put the parentheses and semicolon. So what that's going to do is that will go to that part of the code and run everything in that method. So, and then I can, for example, just to show you what's going on, like I can say I'm back in main here, and then I'll go to my name, and I can call the method as many times as I want. So now I run this code. What it's doing is it says, okay, I'm in main, so I print out the main part of the program. Now, it goes to my name. So it runs down to this bit of code and executes all the code in here. And then once it's done, it goes back to where you came from, and it continues on. So it says back in main. And then it says, okay, my name again. So I'm going to go back down to this section of code and then do everything that we have in there. Okay, so that's the basics. And obviously, I can write as many methods as you want. There's no limit to that. Now, you might also be wondering, could I send a bit of data to main or to my name? Well, maybe not this, but let's write another method. So you can send data to another method if it is set up like that. Okay, so let's have another one. Let's say public static void multiname. So what this one's going to do is this is going to print out my name a certain number of times. So when you do this, you can declare variables for this method in the input or in the parentheses. And then those variables are used only in this method. So when I want to call this method, I need to send it an integer. So when I want to call this, I can call like multiname, and I could send it, say, 4. Okay, so what that'll do is that sends 4 down there to that method. And then when you get to that method, whatever the input is in the parentheses, it will set n to be 4. In this case, if I call multiname 10, it would set that to be 10, of course. Okay, so what I'm going to do in here, I want to print my name out. So this method will print my name n times. When you write methods, you generally want them to have one specific task in mind. And you're going to break your code up into a bunch of different methods that just kind of do one specific task. So inside this method, I need a for loop if I want to do something n times. So I'll just do I equals 0, I is less than, I want to do it n times, and then I'll do an I plus plus. And then every time through the loop, I'm going to go ahead and print out my name. Hello, I am Gary. Okay, so what that's going to do then is when I get to this bit of code right here, this multi-name, I'm going to call that method and I'm going to send it the number 4. So then it takes this 4, goes down here, puts in an n equals 4 here, and then it just says, okay, I'm going to go through this for loop 4 times, and then prints this out 4 times as I kind of go through it. Okay. So, and of course, if I wanted to print it out multiple times, right, I could also do, I could set up like some number. Let's say I'm feeling really egotistical and I want to print out my name 10 times. I could call multiname 10. And it'll just do it again. It'll set n to be 10 and then execute that same bit of code. Okay. Now, you might be thinking, hey, could I use another method to do that? Like, if I just was too lazy to print out the print line there with my name, I could even call another method. So I could even just call the myName method. So every time through this loop, so I went through this loop 4 times, it would just call the myName method 4 times. And that's fine. Like one method can call another, no problem. So that's kind of messy, so I'm not going to do it. But that is like, I mean, wow, we can run it. But that is like another alternative. So I could just go down to this method and says, hey, all I'm going to do is call this method n times, and just goes through and does that a bunch. Okay. So that's how you can send something data. If you want to send something multiple things, so if you want multiple inputs, just separate them with parentheses. So if I want to have public static void, I'll just call this yes. I could input some string, and these variables I can call them whenever I want. It doesn't matter. Like let's say I input a string and then a double. And I don't even have to use this. Like this is just a lame method. It doesn't actually do anything. But when I call this method, it needs to have a string and a double. And I'll show you that must match. So if I try and just call it like this, we're going to see this doesn't actually compile. So when I try and run it, it says, okay, this method cannot be applied to the given types. The method requires you to send it in parentheses, a string, comma, a double, but you sent it nothing. So when you call a method, you must match the input types. So I can't do that. Also, I realized I meant to use the variable here. That's my bad. Like that. You can send it a variable like that. But when I did yes, that doesn't really compile. So I need to send it a string and then a double. And the order matters. So if you try and do like 23, comma, that's Michael Jordan's number, or LeBron, I guess, the 2 best players in NBA history. So when you go ahead and hit compile, like it says the same thing. It says like, oh, well, not same thing, but a different thing. It just says there's an incompatible type. So the order actually matters. You have to send it a string, comma, and then the double. Okay, and an int, of course, counts as a double. And that'll go through and run that code. So that's what I'm doing. If it takes a string and then a double, that's how you set it up. Okay, now you might think, well, that's terrific. I can send something down to a method. Is there a way that I could get that method to send back a number back to my main? And in fact, the answer to this is yes, there is. So if you want a method to return a value, and unfortunately you can only return one value. You can't like return an int and a string. You can only return one int or one double or something. If you want a method to return a value to main, you just replace the void with whatever type of variable you want to send back. And by the way, void, we've seen that word before. I'm going to finally explain. Void means the method does not return anything. So this method maybe does some printing, this method does some printing, maybe it does some fancy calculations, but it doesn't send anything back to main. If you want to return something back to main, you're going to get rid of the void and just put a different type there. So say I want to write a method that takes the average of 2 ints as a double. Okay, so I'm going to write this method. It's not going to return nothing. It returns that double. It doesn't print anything. It's going to send it back, send the double back to my main method. So I'm going to do public static double, and I'm going to call this average of A and B. Okay, so how do I do this? Well, I could do this in a couple different steps. I'll calculate my average to be, and I'm going to do A plus B divided by 2. Now, I remember there's a casting issue there, because if I do an int divided by an int, it doesn't give me decimal, so I need to cast it. And then what I'm just going to do is I can return that average like that. Okay, so what that does is that basically says when you call this method, it sends back this value. So when I go ahead and call this method, so let's go ahead and set up some examples. So I could put this inside a print line. So I could say I want to print out the average of, let's say, 4 and 5. Okay, so what happens here is the average 4, 5 will get replaced by whatever the method returns. So when I run this code, what it's going to do is it says, okay, I'm at this point, I'm going to call the average method. I'm going to send it a 4 and a 5. So it comes back down here. It says, okay, A is 4, B is 5. Now I calculate the average to be 4.5. I store that in a double, and then I return 4.5. So then it goes back up here, and in my print line, it replaces this this average call with 4.5, and that's what got printed out to the screen. I could do this in a couple different steps too. I could also save this as a variable. So let's say I set up two numbers to be 3, and I set up another number to be 10. I can set up a double, their average to be, okay, so I'm going to call this method. So I write the name of the method. I send it these inputs. And then I could just save that, and it's stored as a variable kind of in perpetuity here, so then I could just go ahead and print that out. And we'll see that when I go ahead and print out the average, it goes ahead and works. So again, it calls this method, it says, okay, 3 and 10, I'll send those back down. I do the math within here. This sends back a 6.5. So the method returns 6.5, so we set this variable to equal what it returns. So that the return, as you saw, is a special keyword, right? It lit up in a different color. And that's the end of the method. So it sends this value and ends the method. So one thing interesting is you can't actually change anything after a return. So if you try and do this, it'll say it's an unreachable statement. Because when you get to return, it leaves this method. It's done. Like when you get to return statement, you are done in this method, and it's going back to wherever you called this method from, and then storing that value. Okay, so those are the basics of methods. Those are the inputs and outputs. Just the type that you have, the way you write a method is a method header is going to look like this. You're going to do public static on every method, and then you're going to do the return type, and then you're going to write the name of the method, and then you're going to have your inputs and parentheses. And of course, the inputs, you have to declare the type, and then you have to declare the name of it, and with multiples, you just separate them with commas. Okay, thanks for watching. That's the basics. Bring questions in class. I'll have some more in video too. Thanks.